While the students are cooking, I'm going to find out what late Victorian life was like at the school for Dorothy and her family. So this room that we're in, now it's the library, it used to be the big school, it's called, in 1896. What went on in here? Is it a big classroom?
Yes, it's really the main teaching room.
How many boys are we talking about here?
You're talking about 80 boys overall, of whom about 20, never more than 30 in this period would have been boarders.
So here is Dr. Hartley, the headmaster, Mrs. Hartley, the Hartley kids, and that's little Dorothy there. What sort of a man was he? He looks very respectable here in his mortarboard.
Yes, you have to remember that the headmaster of the grammar school had a real status. It was a minor squirearchy, and so there was that sort of distance and respect in a way.
I have to say Dorothy in all of these pictures looks a little bit grumpy.
Yes, yes.
Would you like to share your childhood home with 80 boys? I'm not sure
I don't think so. I don't think so.
And Dorothy's mother, Mrs. Hartley, she was involved in the running of the school, wasn't she?
She was, I think, pretty well the sole runner of the school. There's nobody but a matron, which they can't always afford, plus a sort of a job man, you see.
So Mrs. Hartley, she's essentially the head of catering.
I think she's probably the only caterer, really, most of the time.
Oh, golly.
From the finances, I can't see how it could have been run in any other way without her doing almost all the work herself.
Producing food for 80 boys. And this made an impression on Dorothy. She remembers it. She describes the school kitchen here. She said it was masculine and enterprising. I guess they had to be pretty enterprising to feed all of those boys. She talks about homemade bread rising each week in a huge tub set before the fire, and piles of Yorkshire tea cakes came daily from the baker.
It was here that I first realised the specialities of England. Bilberries from the mountains in leaking purple crates. From the east coast came barrels of herrings. Oxfordshire sent crates of wonderful fruit. From the north came sacks of oatmeal.
Roll up, get some stargazy pie.
Fish heads, fish tails, herrings.
You're supposed to eat the actual head and the tail.
No, you're not, but let's give it extra flavour.
Okay, have a bit, please.
Which one would you like, sir?
I don't even like fish.
Get some stargazy pie.
Please.
Get it whilst it's warm.
We'll eat anything you put out for them. They like to come to school and have a bacon sandwich, and then at break time they come out with big slices of pizza, and then they come and have big bowls of pasta and homemade cake, and then they go home and eat again.
Imagine Mrs. Hartley then, the headmaster's wife, catering for 80 growing boys. How did she do it?
Don't know. She must have worked from 5 in the morning till 10 at night.
Nice.
Yeah, it's nice. Normal food's nicer.
Normal food is nicer. Oh, okay. Verdict on the semolina? Good. The Hartleys ate pretty well at the school. Not so people in the poorer farming communities nearby. In Food in England, Dorothy writes of families in the Dales whose diet depended on what they could produce from the land around them.
If you came here 100 years ago, you would have seen a different sort of farming. It would have been more of a mixed farming. There would have been sheep, there would have been cattle, but there would have also been crops, particularly oats, and a variety of barley that does well at this altitude called big. You're about 800 feet above sea level here. Wheat is just not going to succeed. Most villages were surrounded with oat fields.
It's kind of got more boring in a way, hasn't it?
Well, we had to be self-sufficient.
Yeah.
Of course, we aren't any longer.
No.
And that's really what this sort of food was about, really.
Self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
Northern grit.
Survival.
Dorothy visited the Dales regularly as a child. Later, she described how oats were the basic ingredient of meals up here.
Oatcake and porridge were the two staples of this region, and every farmhouse, every village, every area developed their own ways of making various oatcakes. They often went by their Norse name. They were sometimes called haverkak or havercake.
Does it not mean have a cake? Help yourself.
Now, the word hafer or haver is a Norse word meaning oats. So haversack is a bag for putting your oats in.
So it is.
I've already made some batter.
Batter. What's in the batter?
It's a mixture of very, very fine sifted oatmeal, milk, water, a little bit of salt, and some yeast.
Easy peasy then.
Yeah. If you bring the bowl over and get as close as you can without burning yourself, okay, I'm going to ladle that onto the girdle, like that, and then I get the scraper and I go like that with it. There you go. We'll just let that cook. This is really food that has absolutely vanished and disappeared. You dip it in your soup for your evening meal. You'd wrap up cheese in it. It's very nice. It's really, really good stuff. Well worth reviving, I think. Don't burn yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, just use your fingers. That's it. Perfect. Okay, shall I hang that up for you?
I can do it.
Brilliant.
What do you actually think of Dorothy Hartley? Where does she fit into the history of food for you?
Dorothy is part of a group of people who started to actively try to investigate disappearing customs. People like Cecil Sharp, who was collecting folk songs and folk dances in the early 20th century. There was also a contemporary of Dorothy Hartley called Florence White, who was a founding member of the English Folk Cookery Association. And I think all of them realised they were living at a time when rural customs were vanishing rapidly. And I think the whole point of their activities was to try and record these things before they entirely disappeared.
That's what's really valuable, her work as an oral historian.
Yeah, that's the richest part of the book, is where she actually talks to a ploughman or a shepherd. It's when you hear the voice of the lady who's describing how she scrapes the bristles off her pig after she's killed it with a candlestick, you know. It's that kind of thing that's so marvellous about it. That is the best bit of the book.
That's the world we have lost.
Yeah.
In old-fashioned country houses, no housemaid's box was complete without a couple of goose pinions. Those strong, firm plumes which were so excellent for dusting ledges. A stiff-trimmed goose pinion is also kept by the lady's maid for taking the dust from velvet.
Dorothy remembered the Yorkshire Dales from her very earliest childhood. But at the start of the 20th century, she and her family moved down to the warmer landscape of the Midlands. By 1904, Edward Hartley was losing his eyesight. He had to give up his job as headmaster of the boys' school in Skipton. Instead, he became a rector in Rempston in Nottinghamshire, quite a small parish, and the family moved south. They ended up living here, in this Elizabethan, rambling, impressive house. And this is only the back.
A lovely old house with every medieval inconvenience. The nearest shop was 5 miles away and we had no car. A butcher called once a week, a grocer once a fortnight.
Dorothy was 11 years old when her family arrived here, and now she had a room of her own at the top of the house.
It was a double turn of wooden stairs and a low door into a little room, and a second door up wooden steps to a further attic. The old thatch was rotting and full of birds' nests, and there, crouched and cold, I worked from dawn. I loved that room. It was my citadel against all the hard work of long days, and in it I wrote my first book and got my master's art degree.
So this is the very place that Dorothy would work between dawn and the time she had to leave to go to art school. And she used to feed the starlings out of the window here. And we know that for a fact because many years later she wrote letters about it. Do you think she's being a bit melodramatic here when she talks about how The old thatch was rotting up there in the attic, and it was
No, because it was very much like that when I bought it.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't thatch, but
Felicity Fletcher Wilson bought the rectory in 1999. And during renovations, she discovered a secret stash of Dorothy's letters written to the previous owner.
What's great about these letters is that they're very personal. They're her reminiscences about her life here.
Yeah, I think that's what's really nice about them, because you read in the book about the house and it doesn't actually mention the name or anything, but you can put the letters to the book and you come out with a completely different story and something that's very, very personal, actually.
I like the description of how she prepares her workroom. She's scrubbed the oak beams in the wall with hot vinegar. It's not what you'd expect a teenager to be doing, is it? Scrubbing old beams with hot vinegar.
No, not at all.
Dorothy quickly became a professional artist, didn't she?
Well, I think at this time she was already doing artwork. I found some illustrations of Dorothy's in a book by Geoffrey Henslow. And there are some 90-odd illustrations in here, which goes to show what a busy girl she was.
They seem to just set up all the things that she's going to be interested in. There's a real attention to historical costume, and also there's a lot of landscapes and countryside.
There are. Countryside.